So it's time for my yearly visit to the doctor, so let's get this started.
So back to borderline personality disorder. This is actually a really big topic, but I'm only going to briefly define the disorder for you, and I'm going to use our Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the 5th edition, and I'm going to read the definition. So borderline personality is defined by the following: a pattern of unstable relationships, self-image, and emotional expression marked by impulsivity, beginning in early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following.
Okay, check. So far, so good. Now I gotta meet 5 out of the 9.
Important that you realize that it's 5 or more of these characteristics. So what you don't want to do is take out one and say, oh, I have that. Does that mean I have borderline personality disorder? No, unless you have several of these things. Number 1 is frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. An example of this is the person who may seem to read into things too easily.
Read into things too easily. Definitely have an issue with misunderstanding, misreading conversations. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of confusion there. Interpersonally as well, for sure.
Number 2, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships, characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. In this kind of relationship, the person with borderline personality disorder may at one point think that you're the best thing ever and you can do nothing wrong. And then the next moment or the next day, you're the worst thing ever. The exact opposite.
Oh, most definitely. Definitely when I look back, for sure. There's no question about that. And now that I realize that, it's definitely a fear for me in the future for relationships, for sure.
Number 3 is an identity disturbance. You have a markedly persistent or unstable self-image or sense of self. This kind of identity disturbance occurs at a deep level, and not to be confused with whether you're not sure if you're meant to be a teacher or an astronaut. This is a confusion about core identity issues like your gender or your sexuality or even your spirituality. Now, I tiptoe around this because I don't want you to walk away thinking that anyone who wants to change their gender has borderline personality disorder. In fact, as I mentioned before, an important thing to remember with this is that the diagnosis is based on a grouping of symptoms of the things that I've listed. So you need 5 of them. And it's not that anyone who's angry, say, has borderline personality disorder, or anyone who's ever cut themselves must be borderline. It's about having multiple things that fall into this category and having it present a problem for you in many ways.
This one's a little tricky. Now, we did have an identity crisis when I confronted the fact that I no longer wanted to be a meat cutter and understood that who I was. I lived, eat, and breathed it. And trying to realize or visualize something past that created quite a bit of identity crisis. And up to this point, I could say that it has been an issue. No, I have a very good sense of who I am. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. So this would be a symptom that I had and worked on and made a lot of progress in that area. So it definitely was an issue at one time, for sure, and maybe not so much now. So, we get a half a point for that one, I guess.
Number 4 is impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging. Some examples of this could be reckless spending, or reckless sexuality, drug abuse, or binge eating.
Boy, now we're getting to the tough stuff. Reckless spending, we've done a lot better on that. Mainly because we've controlled our drug abuse and our hypersexuality. We haven't done cocaine since June. And as far as sexual relations, in a personal setting, I haven't been with someone personally since 2015. I did have that spend, I had that quite the spend of that after 2015 with escorts and that. That was highly out of control. But I haven't had actual personal sex since probably, oh my God, Jesus Christ. So let's reverse this. Last time I had sex with someone I actually cared about was 2015. The last time I had, well, if you want to call it sex, paid sex, would have been, oh my word, probably 2016, I guess. Yeah, and then once we've stopped that, then it was just drugs and masturbation. Then we stopped using cocaine in June of 2018. And basically, the reckless spending, the hypersexuality, the drug abuse were all pretty much taken care of simultaneously, I guess you could say. Like they were in increment steps, but definitely that issue has been those issues have definitely been resolved. For sure. But how could I say this? I think a better way of saying it would be reckless spending, hypersexuality, and drug abuse no longer control my life in a negative way. Now, saying that doesn't mean that if I was in a relationship that I would most likely spend a ton of money on her. I would definitely want to have sex all the time. And I would definitely want to have sex with her high. Now, that would be something I would consider doing. That's not something that I would have to do. Whew. Boy, that was a fucking mouthful. Okay, binge eating. There's definitely still some of that, for sure. Especially now that I'm working out. But I know when I'm feeling maybe a little depressed or a little manic, I could have days where I constantly eat. but it's moments of that. It's not something that is an everyday occurrence. So, whew, boy, that was a mouthful.
Number 5 would be recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, or threats, or even self-mutilating behavior. And this would be things like cutting yourself or taking overdoses of pills even though you don't really want to die. You're just responding to internal distress, and that's why you're doing these things.
Okay, suicidal tendencies. Definitely not. Definitely not. Today. In the past, I would definitely take chances with my life. Would be a better way of explaining that. Not to harm myself, but put myself in extremely risky situations, whether it be doing way too many drugs at once, whether it be driving extremely fast, whether it be just doing anything that is extremely risk to my safety, most definitely.
Number 6 would be an unstable reactive mood, and this would be things like episodic low mood, irritability, or anxiety that usually lasts a few hours or a few days. And this is one of the key differences between borderline personality and bipolar disorder, and I'll expand on that after I get through the criteria.
There's no question of that whatsoever. Next. But this is going to be interesting because we're going to get into how personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and bipolar are actually two different things, but they do kind of overlap and intertwine. So maybe I'll put that at the beginning of the video, or maybe I'll just explain it now. Borderline personality disorder would be considered the city you live in, to make it like an analogy, and having bipolar would be the weather that you would have in that city. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's continue.
Number 7 is chronic feelings of emptiness, and this is one of the reasons people with borderline personality disorder cut themselves. It's a coping mechanism to help them feel real. Some people will cut themselves, though, to relieve tension.
Okay, now this one, I'm gonna have to kind of, excuse me, I'm gonna have to kind of hypothesize. I think I do what she's talking about, but I think I do it in the way I train, as in I work it with weights. I prefer to train. For example, if someone normally does a set, they'll do 8 reps of an exercise. Then they'll stop and do another set. I, on the other hand, need to train to failure. I need to do a drop set, and I need to get an extreme amount of intensity out of that set. If I don't, it's not fulfilling. Training that way definitely helps me. Now, the question is, if I didn't work out, would I want to cut myself or lash out? I don't know. I think I'd have to have the person in front of me discussing this part of it. But there's definitely a need of mine to inflict pain to myself. Now, whether it's to fill an emptiness, it's a good question. There is definitely a sense of me being alone. I think the only way to truly answer this this part of this is if I was in a healthy relationship. I think would be the only way to find out for sure. Because I am now comfortable being alone, whereas at one point I didn't know how to be alone. I didn't know that. Now I'm comfortable being alone, but it does get lonely. And I think the way I train subsidizes that feeling. Boy. Yeah, that's the best way I can describe that part of it. So I'm not sure we're going to give ourselves on that one. I don't know if we're going to get a point for that or not. Maybe another 0.5. Yeah, we'll give ourselves another 0.5 for that, because we're in there somewhere, so we'll give us a 0.5.
Number 8 is inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger. And this can look like temper tantrums, constant anger, or physical
fights. Okay, now
fights.
this without question. However, these outbursts will only occur if I'm in a situation without proper structure. For instance, if oh boy. Example, when I thought I could go back to work, I was on the job. Things were very unorganized and chaotic. I got very, very angry. I needed to take control. And I would have went to any lengths to correct that situation, even to the point of violence. So that feeling is still there. I make sure I don't put myself in those situations. So I'm very aware of my capabilities in certain situations, and I will remove myself from that immediately for the fear of feeling that way. Yeah, simple answer, I guess.
So number 9 and the last one is transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. Clinicians sometimes call these micropsychotic episodes. They're not full-blown psychosis, but they're close.
Okay, here's where things get really, really tricky. As far as what she's just said there, absolutely. That's where you see in my videos where I refer to as SID, okay? Now, I always thought that part of me was a symptom of being manic in regards to being bipolar, my mood, but it's not. So-called SID is part of my personality. I used to think it was a result of my bipolar, but it's not. That symptom, as it applies to me, is part of my personality. Now, it's not a separate personality. It's a part of my personality that disassociates, that gets super, oh God, it's almost impossible to explain. But the point I'm trying to make is that's my personality, not a symptom of being bipolar. This is something I've only recently learned not too long ago, that the SID character or the SID part of me is my personality, not a result of being bipolar. So it's a completely separate thing. I thought this symptom was a result of being bipolar, but it's not. But we definitely have this symptom for sure. Now, is it just to clarify a little more? What does that mean? Does that mean that I have, in regards to this symptom, Doesn't mean I have a breakout separate personality altogether. Not at all. It is still me, but it's me ramped up. And when I'm ramped up, combination with a manic behavior of, so basically my personality, because this way, where I'm disassociative, combined with bipolar this way, when the two interject, that's the result of the Sid character. I call him a character, but that's how, see how it can get very confusing? Yeah, so we understand that a lot now. Now we understand that a lot better now. So it's nothing negative. It's nothing negative at all. I thought it was something I really needed to worry about. Like, geez, you know, am I not having control of what's happening to me? I am in control. It's just me ramped up. And yeah, I can go on and on about that, but we've definitely met this criteria. So this part of the criteria. So I believe that brings us to what, 6 or 7? I don't know. I'll have to count it after I shoot this video, but long story short, yeah, we now know we have borderline personality disorder coupled with bipolar. So yeah, so it was definitely a long road to understanding this, but now that we do, we're living a very, we're definitely doing a lot better, and it'll continue to get better. I hope that everyone in my position can get to this point, you know, because it definitely was a tough road. But this is what I do every now and again. Instead of going to the doctors, you know, I'll just kind of revisit everything. Just revisit everything, you know, and look at it honestly and logically, you know, and just as a reminder, because there are days where everything is great. Life couldn't be better, you know, and it's so easy to forget who we actually are. And if we forget who we actually are, sometimes it can come at a very high cost. So this is just an example to you guys, what I do to remind myself not to take my health for granted. Because once I start thinking, oh, everything's great, there's no problems, that's when problems arise. So this is giving myself a check and saying, Scott, listen, bud, this ain't going away. But you can learn how to better manage it, be a better person, be a healthier person, and eventually be a positive impact on myself and hopefully a relationship someday. So I'll let her spew on a little bit more here, and yeah, that's all I gotta say. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Till I see you guys again, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. KRAHM bless you all.
So that's the criteria for borderline personality disorder. It's a lot of stuff. And so it's not a matter of taking one of these things out and saying, I must be borderline because I cut myself. You need to have at least 5 of these 9 things that I just listed going on at the same time, or in general, that's the kinds of things that you do or feel. So back to borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder. They look very similar because you can have the mood swings and impulsivity, but in the case with borderline personality disorder, you're more likely to have mood swings that can shift from hour to hour over the course of the day. With borderline personality disorder, the group of symptoms, not just low or high mood, but the group of symptoms that make up an episode need to last at least 2 weeks if you're in the depressed state and 1 week if you're in the manic state. So you aren't shifting in and out of states hour to hour. Also, the sense of fear of abandonment and unstable identity are things that have more to do with your hardwiring. And it's also influenced by your environment as well. It kind of goes to the nature versus nurture theory. How much of who you are is based on genes versus how you were raised in your formative years. And these issues are not part of bipolar disorder. Think of mania as like a hurricane that swoops in and swoops out and leaves the hot climate behind. Some other examples of the practical differences is that bipolar disorder does not make you do manipulative things. Manipulative behavior has to do with your personality. Also, people who are manic or depressed at the time don't engage in self-harm only because of their mood state. So if you get depressed, the coping skills that you employ at the time have to do with your personality, and it's not the depression itself. So the depression may push you into doing something that's self-harming, but it's your personality type or your personality coping skills that reacts to the depression with self-harm. The treatment for borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder are very different, but they can overlap. The primary treatment for borderline personality disorder is a psychotherapy called dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. It's an offshoot of cognitive behavior therapy that was developed specifically for borderline personality disorder. And when it's implemented by someone trained in DBT, it's very effective. And it's usually a combination of group and individual sessions. The primary treatment for bipolar disorder is medication management. Sometimes with the depressive episodes, if they're mild to moderate, they can respond well enough to cognitive behavior therapy, but manic episodes usually require medication. People with borderline personality disorder can still have a mood disorder, so you can have both problems. So if a person with borderline personality disorder also becomes depressed, then they may require medication to get through the depression. Also, sometimes the swinging moods that you can have with borderline personality disorder can respond well to mood stabilizers, even though it's not considered bipolar disorder. So mood stabilizers are mood stabilizers, and they can help people with borderline personality disorder who have a lot of mood shifts or intense anger. But the reason you'd be using the mood stabilizer is to treat the mood instability that goes along with the personality disorder, and it doesn't mean automatically that you must have bipolar disorder.
Treatment. Very controversial. I'm going to share with you my thoughts on this and what I'm doing about it. Okay. How do I treat my personality disorder and my bipolar? I don't. And I'll tell you why. This is where I'm at in life. I've been doing so much self-evaluation, self-awareness. I've put a lot of time and thought into what's happening to me. And I've learned how to live without medication or treatment. Now, is that a path for everyone? Absolutely not. But you ask, well, why not do that now? The reason I don't do that now is because I've learned how to manage my life this way. So my thought process with the introduction of treatments, medications, psychotherapy, at this point could only harm me. I'm very functional. I'm happy. For the most part, I think I'm as happy as the average person. You know, I know my limitations, and my worst fear is to introduce, especially an antipsychotic. Now, I work very, very hard at recognizing my low points. For me, that's what I do not want to mess with. And I think the introduction of medication or someone getting into my head and putting different ideas in, that'll cause me to slip into depression. And it happened to me in the past. And I'm very, very aware of that. For me, depression is the worst possible thing. Being manic, having borderline personality disorder is recognizable and manageable. But having severe depression is the absolute worst thing in the fucking world. And I will not take the chance of subjecting myself to increase my chances of that happening to me. I can't think of any situation in my life that will occur that will put me into a depression hole that I cannot get out of. There's lots of things that have happened in my life that have been extreme lows, and I've been able to pull myself out of it. And because I recognize it's almost like a habit now. I get depressed, I know what I have to do to pull myself out. I have steps to take myself out of that depression hole. And I will not risk the chance of medication or any drugs interfering with that. So is that for everyone? Probably not. I would think that if someone's diagnosed earlier on and they've had psychotherapy and they've done a lot to treat it early, I think medication and psychotherapy and all that kind of stuff will probably help. But in my situation, I've had to live with this and just take it step by step on my own. That's a pretty fair statement. I had to figure this out by myself. And I just don't see there's no pros. At this point in my life, there is just no pros to fucking with what I worked so hard to achieve. So, let's get back to,
So this can get confusing. There's a lot of nuances to this. That's why the best treatment should be determined by a clinician who's evaluated you. But the gist of it is that there is an overlap between borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder. Sometimes people with borderline personality disorder would need the same kind of medication that a person with bipolar disorder would need. However, bipolar disorder tends to be more episodic, like bad weather, whereas borderline personality disorder has a fairly consistent set of behaviors that go up and down in intensity and that tend to hang around for a long time. That's it for this topic. If you're new to my channel, it may seem a little disjointed with needing to go to other videos to get more information, and that is kind of by design because I don't want to make these videos so epic in length that with all these definitions and going through all these criteria, then it makes it hard. I mean, it's hard enough to go through the criteria just for one disorder. You see, you had to read through that long list. But I think the best way to get a good grasp on any of these topics is to chunk it out in little pieces at a time. So that's why I've developed playlists to help you for the various illnesses, to kind of help you get through them in little bit by little bit. And as I continue to make more videos, I'll continue to develop the playlists in a way that you can start with one and just go through and have a more complete understanding of the various psychiatric issues.
Okay, so we're at the end of our video. The name of this doctor, she has videos on YouTube at, her name is Dr. Tracey Marks. My final thought, this is what I would like to share with you. I know after I was diagnosed, I went on the internet and I started reading, because I wasn't originally diagnosed with bipolar. There was nothing said about having a borderline personality disorder. That wasn't even mentioned. It was bipolar, and that was it, and that's what I researched. Now there was a lot going on in my life when I was diagnosed. So when researching it, my reading comprehension is extremely bad. Basically what that means is when I read something, I have a hard time understanding what I'm reading. Like it doesn't spark. Like if I read a book, I can't get a picture in my head. I'll have to reread the paragraph 1,000 times. So that was the first problem. Not understanding what I was reading. I think in my case, it was kind of a sink or swim type of scenario for me. I'm not sure. I imagine people have to take the path that I did. You know, I never had good experiences with doctors, psychologists. It just never fit. You know, I got to a point where I knew it was something I had to do myself. I had to do it myself. I imagine that's probably the hard way of doing it, but it's kind of like a sink or swim type of scenario, right? And I was lucky to survive it. And yeah, so my advice to you, whew, boy oh boy. Oh my God, I don't even know what I could tell you guys. What would be the best advice that I could give you if you come across this video and you suffer from mental illness? Without knowing you personally, it'd be so tough to give you the right direction. You know what? The best advice I could give you would be to go to YouTube, go to my very first video that I made back in 2016 and see the shape that I was then. I know there's a lot of video guys, there's like 500 videos, but I think if you started from video 1 and worked your way all the way through the videos in order, one after another, maybe in that process you could see me change, learn, grow as each video comes on. If you watch them, like if you're watching them in succession, maybe through my process you'll understand your process better. I think that is probably the best advice I could give. Learn, watch my journey. See what I faced, what I had to overcome, and then maybe through that, it'll help you learn and recognize things about yourself. Because I don't know you, so it'd be impossible for me to give you advice for something that, you know, I don't believe. No one can tell you who you are. You know, it's something that you have to discover for yourself. You know, people can tell you things that'll help trigger things that you can learn about yourself. Is that even right? I'm just, best advice I can give you is go to YouTube at KRAHM TV, KRAHM TV. Start at the very goddamn bottom, video number 1, and just follow my story to this point. That's the best advice I can give you, and that's the reason why I started doing these videos in the first place, because I knew my journey was going to be interesting. And yeah, fuck, I'm just rambling here now. So anyways, check out the videos, and hopefully you learn something from my experience. At least, you know, yeah, kind of at a loss of words now. I've been doing this video for the last 3 hours now, so oh, I'm anxious to kind of just relax. So good luck, guys. You know, you have my yeah. So I'll see you guys again. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you all.